Okay, so our Bible study this evening. Last week we started talking about the privilege of suffering. I told you that those two words sort of don't go together, at least not in our vernacular, but when you're talking in God's economy, they actually do go together. Um, but we don't usually look at suffering in a positive light. But there's much good that can come out of suffering. In fact, some of the stories that we are aware of came out of the crucible of affliction, the place of deep sorrow. You know, we know of Corrie ten Boom because of the deep sorrow and anguish that she walked through, being in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. We're familiar with Johnny Erickson Tada because of her being paralyzed and all the sorrow and affliction that overcame her. And so we want to suffer in a way. We're all going to suffer. We're all going to have hardships and trials, but we want to suffer in a way that honors the Lord, and in a way that's worthy of our calling, a way that is worthy of us being called Christians. We belong to Christ, and in our sorrow and anguish, we should seek to bring Him glory. Our life is brief. We have to remember that our life is brief, and that in this life, Jesus promised, we will have tribulation. So one of our aims and desires is in our sorrow to bring Him glory. We want our sorrow to benefit others. We want our sorrow to be our sorrow to be fruitful, and our anguish to be fruitful for other people as well. Job is a man that, aside from our Lord Jesus, I don't know that there's a man in the scriptures that had more sorrow or suffered as greatly as Job did. His sorrow is beyond anything I can imagine. In fact, when I read this story, it's difficult for me to read it with a dry eye. I can't, my mind doesn't have a file. Like I don't have a file. I don't have a place to put this type of anguish, sorrow in a file in my mind. It just doesn't compute. I can't wrap my mind around it. Here's an example of someone who suffered in a godly manner. And quite frankly, Job, brother Job, he's a rebuke to me personally. He shames me. You know, Job had less light than I have. He had less revelation than what I possess. And yet he was more faithful. He was more faithful having received little light than I am faithful having received great light. And so his story, his life is a rebuke to me. James writes this concerning Job. In James chapter 5, verse 11, James writes, "We give great honor to those who endure under suffering. For instance, or for example, you know about Job, a man of great endurance. You can see how the Lord was kind to him at the end, for the Lord is full of tenderness and mercy." You see, Job stands for us as an example, as a beacon of hope, as a beacon of faith. For those of us who are suffering, I think again of Joe and Carol. I think of Ravi's wife. You know, when I got saved 30 years ago, I was introduced to Ravi. And I could not read enough of his books. I could not hear enough of his cassette tapes. He influenced my life, a godly man who influenced my life. And so when I heard of his passing today, I wept, I cried, because he influenced my life as another godly man gone from this world. I'm happy for Ravi, but I'm sad for the great loss for us. I'm sad for the great loss for his dear wife and his family. But Job, like Ravi and many others, they stand as a beacon of hope, faith. His life shows us how to trust God, believe in Him. He's an example of great faith. Last week we looked at the first 5 verses of Job. Now here's a man who was blameless, upright, impeccable character, integrity. Speaks of moral excellence. In chapter 31 of Job, is a description, a deeper description of this man's character. He was other-centered, he was generous, he was compassionate, he was kind. Listen to verses 16 through 20 of Job chapter 31. Job speaking, he says, "Have I refused to help the poor or crushed the hopes of the widows? Have I been stingy with my food and refused to share it with orphans? No, 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 no. No. This isn't Job. This isn't who Job was. He says, no, no. From my childhood I have cared for orphans like a father. Listen, he loved the orphans as though he were their own father. And he says, all my life I have cared for widows. Whenever, Job says, whenever I saw the homeless without clothes and the needy with nothing to wear, did they not praise me for providing wool clothing to keep them warm? You see the type of man this was? He was wealthy, he was an affluent man, he was a blessed man, and he shared his wealth with other people, with the widows, with the poor, with the needy, with the homeless, with the orphan. This is an outstanding man, a man who feared God. He shunned evil. Listen, he walked blameless in the light that he was given. Okay? And God blessed him abundantly. 10 children, we found out last week, livestock, servants. He was wealthy, he was prominent. It says so that in the East there was not a greater man than Job. But his greatest joy, all of those things pale in comparison. The possessions, the wealth, the servants, all that pales in comparison to the great joy that his children brought him. 3 of the 5 verses that we read last week, 3 of those 5 verses speak concerning his children. That tells you how much he loved his kids, how his heart was for his kids. He interceded for them, he prayed for them, he influenced them, he counseled them, he told them to watch out, to beware. An excellent father through and through. He loved his kids. The joy of his heart was to see his grown kids loving one another, walking in love. They were hardworking. This is a family that's full of joy. Listen, a parent's dream. Absolutely a parent's dream. What parent doesn't want their child to be godly, loving each other, being fruitful, tending to one another? It's a parent's dream. This is his life. This is Job's life described in 5 short verses. And I told you last week, it's exactly the kind of life that we want to have. It's the kind of life that we pray for. The life that we eagerly seek. And I told you, there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with desiring that. There's nothing wrong with praying for that and desiring that type of life. I pray for that type of life. It's a good life. I want to have that type of life. And listen, Christians are exhorted in the scriptures to live a quiet and peaceable life. The scriptures exhort us as Christians that as much as it is in us, that we should live at peace with everyone. We should fear God and walk in holiness. We should shun evil, put away the deeds of the flesh, honor the Lord, and then that way to position ourselves to be blessed and honored by Him. Listen, the Lord always honors those who honor Him. I want my life to be a nice, neat 5 verses. That's what I want my life to be. That's what you want your life to be. It's a good thing to desire. Listen, let me tell you something. That's good and that's not so good. Because a life that is lived like that sometimes can lead to being complacent, getting too comfortable, perhaps having too much time on your hands. And I think the biggest thing that speaks of, at least to me, at least to my life, is self-preservation. See, self-preservation is important to me. Self-preservation is important to us. Hey, let's be honest with ourselves. It's self-preservation. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to have health problems. We don't want to have problems with our kids or our marriages. We don't want those kinds of problems. We don't want financial problems, emotional. We don't want mental problems. Self-preservation, that all falls under self-preservation. And here's something that I've reflected on for quite some time, for weeks actually. You know, COVID-19 has folks wearing masks, gloves, limiting their exposure with people, careful what they're coming into contact with. And all for a good cause. Listen, I'm not mocking or making light of the situation at all. I think those things are necessary to some extent, and they're good precautionary measures, but they speak to self-preservation. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to get sick. And I don't blame them. I don't either. Okay? But here's something. Here's what I've been reflecting on. Imagine for a minute with me, saints. Imagine if we took that same care for our spiritual lives. Imagine for a minute that if we were careful about what we said, if we wore a muzzle over our mouth so that muzzle over our mouth would protect us from things that come out. Because you know what's more dangerous than COVID is poisonous words that can come out. Hurtful words that can come out. Words of gossip, words of complaining. These words, what if we had a muzzle, a spiritual muzzle over our faces, and took more spiritual care of ourselves instead of the physical care that we take? What about that? What if we limited exposure to people that can contaminate us? People that are not good company, that defile our good character by things they're saying, things they're putting in our minds, by the way they're behaving. What if we were more careful about what we were watching and what we were touching? What if we were more careful about our spiritual life than our physical life? Oh, we take great concern for our physical well-being and sometimes not for our spiritual and eternal well-being. Our spiritual well-being is eternal. Those things are eternal. But listen, it's ironic to me that there are some Christians that care very little about the contamination of heresy, of false doctrine, who they keep company with, what they watch or what they touch. That's amazing to me. And yet with Corona, they're all guarded and got everything on. Saints, we gotta examine ourselves. We gotta check in. We gotta see, what is our spiritual condition? We're all a little bit too much into self-preservation. Myself included. I got both hands in the air. Guilty as charged. Okay? But I want the Lord to help me. And I want the Lord to change my mind and change my focus so that I could be more spiritually minded. Now, in Job's story, put it this way, if his story had stayed in 5 verses, we wouldn't know anything about him. We wouldn't be blessed. His life wouldn't encourage us. His faith wouldn't strengthen our faith. His example would be non-existent. But listen, our Lord wants us to bear fruit. And in order for us to bear fruit, we have to die to ourselves. And in order for us to die to ourselves, we have to move into verse 6. We have to walk through some sorrow. God allows some pain. God allows some trials in our lives. God will allow suffering in our lives to get us out of the 5 verses that we hold so dear and near to our lives. So that we can, here it is, so that we can bring him glory. One of the things I pray is, Lord, make me good stewards of the trials that you allow in my life, because I want to bring you glory. We know more, I know more of people through their trials, and people have told me, and I could tell you for myself, I'll put myself as a witness, a testimony, that the trials have made me a better Christian, a person who's closer to God, a person who's deeper in his faith by the trial. Not by the time of ease and comfort, not by 5 verses, but by the trial. When he's moved me into verses 6, 7, 8, and right on down through verse 22, is when God really works and he operates and he brings me, like he did Job, and I'm sure he's done you too, bring you closer. So let's continue reading in verse 6 of Job chapter 1. Verse 6 says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, 'From where do you come?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and shuns evil?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'Does Job fear God for nothing?'" Satan's the devil, isn't he? I mean, the devil. In verse 10 he says, "Have you not made," look at how he mocks God. He says, "Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." This is all God. God blessing Job. Satan took notice of it. It says, but now, verse 11, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And verse 12, and the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Notice, God's not going to stretch forth his hand against Job. But he says to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. Oh, Satan's limited. Satan has to ask permission from God. Satan just can't have his way and do whatever he wants. And then it says, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Verse 6 says, now there was a day. You know, Job had no idea of this day. He had worked all his life to avoid such a day. But I'm going to tell you something about Job, something that we can learn this evening. Job had prepared for that day. He had prepared for that day. He was a man who feared God and was upright. Although Job didn't know that this day was coming, he had prepared for a day that he did not know of. Let me just say this right here. We should prepare beforehand for the day we don't know that's coming. That's something that we can learn right here just in verse 6. We should be preparing beforehand for the day we don't know that's coming. How do we do that? Well, the same way Job did it. You see how he prayed? You see how he rose up early in the morning? You see, we don't have to offer burnt offerings. We've had a burnt offering that was offered in our stead. We have a deeper relationship with God than what Job had. We have Christ. And so maintaining a relationship with Christ, rising up early, interceding for our children. So he had prepared. Oh, he didn't know what kind of day was coming, but he had prepared for that day. Listen, we don't wait, watch, we don't wait until that unknown day gets here to start preparing. Don't wait for that unknown day to get here to then start preparing. Mm-hmm. Jesus said this, build your house, build your faith upon the rock meaning Jesus. Build your faith on Jesus. Why? For the day when the storm comes. Even Jesus taught us that. Jesus said, prepare today for the storm that's coming. Don't wait for the storm to come and then start preparing. What you build on will be revealed in the storm. The whole lesson of the parable is that there is a day coming, it's going to be a storm, and you better prepare now. And you better watch on what you're building. Is it sand or is it a rock? Is it Christ? The time to prepare for the day of the storm is today. I'm going to say it again. The time to prepare for the day of the storm is today. That's what Jesus taught in his parable. Now listen, I truly believe this. I truly believe that COVID-19 has been allowed of the Lord for us to prepare. Prepare for what? For what's coming. For the day that's coming. I don't know the day that's coming. I don't know specifically what's going to happen. Oh, but you better believe this. I'm preparing. I'm spending time with the Lord. I'm in his word. I'm crying out to him. I want sanctification. I want more holiness. I want godliness. I want to shun evil. I want to prepare. I want to be prepared for the day that's coming. I think Corona is just a precursor to the things that are coming. I can't tell you what's coming, but something's coming. Read the Bible. Read the book of Revelation. We're like at the door. Mm-hmm. Of course it's coming. Jesus said it's coming. He warned us. He told us. In Ephesians 6, we're exhorted by Paul to put on the whole armor of God. Why? For what reason? That you may be able to withstand in the evil day. Put on the whole armor of God today so that when that evil day comes, you already have the armor on. What Paul's lesson is, don't wait for the day to come and then start putting on the armor. That's backwards. You don't want to do that. You want to be prepared for when that evil day comes. It's the same lesson that Jesus taught. The same thing. Start building today on the rock for when the storm arrives. The storm is coming. The storm is coming. The evil day is coming. The day. There was a day. And that day is coming. Now listen. God who dwells in eternity, he knew this day would come, right? And he didn't stop it. That, it goes without saying, it's the underlying theme of the book of Job that God loves Job. He's blessed this man, he's taken care of this man, he's honored this man, he loves him. And yet, he knows God dwells in eternity. He's not confined. What took Job by surprise didn't take God by surprise. Never. He dwells in eternity. There is no starting and no beginning. He's eternally past, eternally future. God is eternal. He knew the day was coming. He designed the day. He already knew about the day, but he also knew about the outcome. He also knew what it would produce in his servant Job, and he allowed it. He didn't stop the day. But he knows the end from the beginning, and he knew that Job would be faithful in this trial. He would bring him glory. Listen, he knew that in 2020, he knew that in 2020, there'd be some guy he knew who it would be, but some guy in his house speaking to YouTube people, exhorting them and encouraging them in the book of Job. Not YouTube people, YouTube saints. But do you see what I'm saying? God knows the end from the beginning. He could have stopped the day. He didn't stop it. Job's going to bear much fruit for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Okay? And God knows that. Job doesn't know that. Here's another thing that I want you to know. God didn't consult with Job. God doesn't tell, isn't that something? God doesn't ask Job first. He doesn't say, hey Job, so you're never going to guess what happened today. The angels gathered together and along came Satan. And, I kind of boasted on you a little bit that you're an upright man, you're blameless, and that you fear me. That got him a little twisted. And now he's sort of like on a rampage. He's all burned up, Job. What do you think? Let's consult together. Let me get your counsel, Job. You know that God's not going to ask for our counsel. His ways are not our ways. Our understanding is not his. His ways are above our ways. He doesn't consult with Job to ask him, hey, Job, is it okay? In fact, nowhere in the book of Job does God even tell Job what's happened, why it's happening. Job knows nothing of this behind the scenes. He has no idea. Job has no idea where this is coming from out of left field. He doesn't know. And you know something? I was thinking about this today. I don't know what's worse. Saints, think this through. I don't know what's worse. Is it worse to know or not to know? I don't say, Jesus told, thinking of another story. Jesus told Peter, Satan has desired you, literally, that's how it reads. He's desired you, that he may sift you as wheat. Do you want to know that? He later also in John's gospel, at the end of John's gospel, he tells Peter that he's going to die a martyr's death. I don't know if those are things that I want to know. I can't be certain. But either way, whether you want to know or don't want to know, that's up to you. But it's not really up to you. It's up to God. God is under no obligation to tell you anything. He's sovereign. Listen, God determines what he lets us know and what he doesn't. He has infinite wisdom. Our wisdom is finite. Our understanding is limited. His is unsearchable. He knows us better than we know ourselves. In chapter 33, verse 13, Elihu, one of his miserable comforters, says to Job, why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not account of any of his matters. God doesn't have to give you an account, Job. What Elihu says is true. God doesn't submit to us. God doesn't owe us answers. He's sovereign. He's under no obligation to tell you what's happening or why it's happened. He owes us no explanation. Now, I want to point out a few things concerning the devil. Satan. He came along with the other angels in verse 6 to present himself before God. That tells us this. Not everyone, check this, not everyone that assembles before God does so to worship him and bring him glory. The same devil that made his way into the assembly in heaven still today makes his way into the assembly of his saints on earth. In Spanish, we have a saying in Puerto Rico. It's called está colado. Está colado. Cuando una persona se cuela. Okay? We say está colado. That means the person doesn't belong here. It means a person snuck his way in, or he got past the security, or somehow, made his way in. Está colado. So that's what Satan does. Está colado. He's in the assembly of the saints. Just as he was in the assembly in heaven, so he squirms his way in to the assembly of the saints on earth. Listen, Spurgeon, encouraging faithful pastors, he said this, make certain, I love Spurgeon, he said, make certain your congregation is not a comfortable place for the devil. Annoy him by preaching truth, which he hates. I love that. I don't want Abide Christian Fellowship to be a comfortable place for the devil. I'm going to continue to preach truth whether people like it or not, because I want the congregation of Abide, to be an uncomfortable place for the devil. I'm not looking to fill the church with a whole bunch of non-Christians and half-Christians. That's not my purpose. I want the church to grow deeper, not bigger or wider. I want the church to grow deeper in holiness and godliness. And if my preaching truth gets you upset and you need to leave, then you need to leave. But Satan's not going to be comfortable coming into our midst. Listen, even out of the 12 apostles, there was one named Judas who was the son of perdition. Satan himself entered Judas before Passover. Okay? So the devil will have his way in the assembly of the godly here on earth, just as he did squeeze himself into the assembly in heaven with the rest of the angels. Now here's another thing, about the devil. He doesn't change in the presence of God. Notice he's a devil through and through. Okay? So in the presence of God, he's not pretending to be holy or pretending to be righteous. The devil is the devil. It is what it is. He is who he is. Es lo que es. Okay? He's the devil through and through. He is before God what he is before man. He doesn't change. The devil, you have to know, is under God's authority. He's the devil, but he's God's devil. He's a created being. He's under the control of God. His power is limited. His knowledge is limited. He's a limited devil that submits to a limitless God. You got to remember he was created. He's not all powerful. He's not all knowing. He can't be everywhere at the same time. I want you to know this too about the devil, that evil, wickedness, sinfulness, all these things, hate, resides with the devil, not with God. Some people blame God for things that he has no blame over. In fact, God has no blame over anything. If we want to blame anybody, most of the blame is on us. We were born sinners. Listen, the fact that we have everything we have in this world, COVID-19, what is that a result of? That's a result of sin. God said in the garden, in the day that you eat of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt surely die. Mankind has been dying ever since. They're born spiritually dead. They will physically die. Disease, sin, all manner of wickedness came as a result of sin. God didn't want that. God had a beautiful garden prepared for Adam and Eve, and he gave them a choice. Okay, so every evil, wicked thing resides with the devil and not with God. God had a different plan for mankind. God didn't mess up the plan. Mankind did. Now, it wasn't in God's heart to bring harm to Job. That didn't reside with God. That resided with the devil. In fact, we read last week, it's contrary to God. In fact, God was blessing him. God was taking care of him. God was honoring him. Satan can't stand that. Satan hates that. And Satan saw that. And that's what got Satan all worked up. Now, here's something else about the devil. In verse 7, notice, he's restless. He's restless. He goes to and fro and walks up and down on the earth. Peter tells us in 1 Peter, Peter tells us that he walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Let me tell you something else about the devil. The devil never has a good day. He never rests. He doesn't take breaks. He doesn't have any friends. It's not a party with the devil. You know, some crazy people have told me that they don't believe in God, or the devil's their friend, and hell is a big party. Hell is no party. The devil's not your friend, okay? He's not your friend. The devil is filled with hate. He never has a good plan. He's angry. He's frustrated. He has tenacity. He has dedication. His resolve is to tempt, to torture, to lead into rebellion. And listen, the biggest targets are the ones that God loves. The ones that God has redeemed. Those are his biggest targets, okay? Those are the biggest threat to his kingdom, especially those that are on fire for Jesus. You know, we talked about that on Fire for Jesus some time ago. And those that are on fire for Jesus are the biggest targets for the enemy. The biggest targets. He's the accuser of the brethren. Notice how he appears before God to accuse Job. He appears here doing exactly that, accusing Job. Hey, this is the accusation. You know why Job loves you, God? Because you've blessed him. That's why he honors you. He just loves you because of what you've given him. In other words, it's not even something about you. It's just he's after you, and he honors you because of what you give him and how you bless him. That's the accusation that he's making. Let's continue reading. We'll finish for tonight. Let's continue reading. I got a few more comments and then we'll wrap up. Verse 13. Now there was a day. I don't think that too much time went between verse 6 and verse 13. I think between the day that is mentioned in verse 6 and the day that is mentioned in verse 13 is not a lot of days. Satan is quick, and he wants to accomplish his purpose and his plan to destroy quickly. Notice verse 13. Now, there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Now, we know from last week that the brothers and the sisters, they gathered for days of feasting, birthdays and anniversaries, things of that nature. Verse 14 says, and a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabeans raided them and took them away. Stop right there. Okay, so I put myself in Job's sandals. This is probably what he's thinking here. He's thinking what most of us think. You got to remember that these men and women of the Bible are made of the same stuff, flesh and blood. Okay. What is here, verse 15? Talking about the donkeys and the oxen. These are possessions. These are animals that he possessed, that he owned. You know, when someone's in a car wreck, in an accident, our first inclination is to ask about the loved ones. Not about the car. Not how's the car? No. How's the person you love that was in the accident? How are the other people? What happened? But our major concern, at least it should be, our major concern should be, how's the loved one that was in the wreck, or the person that we know? How are they doing? Why? Because we know that the car is, you know, scrap. It's metal and bolts, and you can replace a car. A car can be replaced, but we care about people. So when he hears from the servant, when he hears about the Sabeans raiding the donkeys and the oxen, he's like, okay, probably just material or, you know, possessions. Not concerned. I can get the oxen back. I can get the donkey back. He's a man of wealth. So to him, it's a little loss. It doesn't move him. He's not that touched. But now look at verse 15 again. It says, indeed they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. This changes. This now here changes. When he hears the servants were killed, I immediately ask myself the question, who were these unnamed servants? Who are they? I put myself in Job's sandals. What would I have done if I were Job? Well, we already read earlier that Job was a man of compassion, that he ministered to orphans and he ministered to widows. He ministered to the ones in need, the poor, okay? Those less fortunate. If I put myself in Job's sandals, I think those would be the people I would hire. They would be family to me. Mm. Those orphans would be the kids that I would have working for me, the kids that I would take in. In fact, Job says himself, I think Job wrote the book of Job. There's some question about that, but I put myself in his sandals and I think those orphans are the ones that I would have taken in. It says here that he loved them like he was their father. Mm-hmm. Those are the orphans that I would have employed. I would have employed the widows. I would have taken care of the poor and the needy. I would have taken care of them. I would have brought them into my household and fed them and taken care of them and gave them employment. That's who I believe these servants were. They were like family to him. They loved Job. These servants loved Job. It was a blessing to work for Job and his family. They were grateful to be employed. It was a blessing. He was honest. Job was considerate. He was kind. His wages were generous. His vacation days, generous. He truly cared about them. He cared about their families. Listen, verse 3 says it was a very large household. Again, his servants considered part of the family, not just hired hands or farm workers. I can tell you that in the back of his mind, Job's mind, he's probably thinking, my kids are okay. He's hoping it doesn't go further than verse 15. Listen, verse 15 is devastating enough. To lose your employees, to grieve their loss, and to carry the pain of their families. You know, when you love people, you take their pain as your own. I went to bed last night heavy because speaking to our dear sister Carol and the hardship that she's going through. They're a wonderful couple, godly couple. And she's a salt of the earth type sister, and so is her husband Joe. And so these type of things you carry. And so, you know, but verse 16 is coming. He doesn't know that verse 16 is coming. He thinks it's going to stop probably at verse 15. He has no idea. So now verse 16 comes next. It says, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God. I want you to notice it was not the fire of God, it's the fire of Satan. Remember, God's got nothing to do with it. He's allowed the devil. The devil's on a leash. He's told the devil, you can do that, but spare his life. Don't touch his flesh. Don't touch his health. That's what God told Satan. So here, the servant says, the fire of God. No, it was the fire of Satan from heaven fell down, burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Then now verse 17. Verse 17 says, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said. Now, listen, folks, this is the hard verse here. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And suddenly, again, just put yourself in Job's sandals here. He's hearing news, wave after wave that's coming. And perhaps thinking, my kids are safe, my kids are safe, my kids are safe. And now comes verse 18. And this servant comes in and he says, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine. They were loving one another, joyful with one another, enjoying each other's fellowship. And suddenly, verse 19, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. There are saints that I love deeply. Some saints among us, right at Abide Christian Fellowship, whom I love deeply, who have received this type of news. The sudden passing of a son or daughter. And I have to tell you, I have no idea. I haven't a clue what kind of anguish and sorrow and pain that is, and what you carry only God knows. Not even your spouse may know what you carry, because dads and moms carry things differently. But I can't imagine getting this type of news. To me, it's possessions and wealth. You can regain that. You can regain possessions. You can pick yourself back up and, start earning money again or whatever. Oh, but your kids. Your kids, perhaps he started thinking, why is it that particular day, why didn't they cancel that one? Or why wasn't, several of them sick? Why didn't they have some flu? Why were they gathering together on that particular day? Satan is a devil. He has no compassion. He has no mercy. He doesn't say, this man's had enough. I'm going to spare his kids. Satan's desire is to kill and destroy you. That's it. Destroy your marriage, destroy your kids, destroy your ministry, destroy your life. Satan's a devil. He doesn't stop being a devil. He doesn't take a break from being a devil. Look what it says here. Verse 20. Then Job arose, he tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The picture that I get in my mind's eye is that Job, shaved head now, robe torn, his face and his hands like this, saying, oh, wow, Lord, blessed be the name of the Lord. Satan kicking him in the head and kicking him in the head and kicking him in the head. And he's saying, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I'm immovable from this place. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. God has given and God has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What a man is Job, that he could be getting kicked in the head by Satan. His heart could be literally torn out of his body, stabbed. It's like Satan just grabbed his heart and just started stabbing his heart. Because something? Kids are like the most precious thing to parents. You touch whatever. You touch my own health. You touch my wealth. You touch my possessions. I don't care. Have it all. But my kids. And here Satan starts to beat him and beat him and beat him. No mercy. Just to kill this man. And all he gets back, every time he pounces him, every time he hits him, is blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Satan, you have no place here. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Saints, listen. I pray this for you today. Whatever you're going through, whatever the enemy's throwing your way, whatever thing in the past, whatever thing you're dealing with, financial or health or kids, whatever, say today, right where you are, right now, say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed, give God glory and shame the devil. Make it the very thing that draws you to God. And you claim, blessed be the name of the Lord. I'm immovable from this place. And the more that comes my way, the more I'll bless him. The more I'll give him glory. Determine that in your heart today. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We know God in theory. We love to know God in theory in the first 5 verses. We don't ever want to walk in these shoes. I don't want to walk in these sandals. I want to stay in the first 5 verses. But if my life would bring him more glory moving into these verses, then blessed be the name of the Lord. May his life be glorified. May my life bring him joy. And may my life be fruitful so that others can benefit, okay, and be encouraged. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Next week, we're going to talk more about the trouble and the anguish of our brother Job.